quantum computers are just better at certain types of calculations than classical computers are today, right? And with qubits, they're fundamentally different than the bits that we use for our systems today, right? Not only can they be 1 or 0, but they can be some degree of both 1 and 0, every gradient in between.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our #1 priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. And if you're joining for the first time, this is part of our the live interview series, the podcast series, for which we meet every Wednesday somewhere between 8 to 11 a.m. Eastern, depending upon the availability of the guest. And today we have a very special guest, and obviously we'll ask him to introduce himself. But before, some of the things from the logistics perspective is that we are going to have many guests in the pipeline. So make sure you guys tune into these episodes. If you have not checked the previous episodes, we have several of them available. So you might want to check them as well. On that note, Brian, I'm going to hand it over to you for the quick intro, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sam, and it's a real pleasure to be here. Can't wait to talk about tech trends with you. I'm Brian Jackson. I'm a Principal Research Director at Infotech Research Group, one of the world's fastest growing IT research firms. We're based in Toronto, Ontario, but have customers, not only all over North America, but the entire world. We've got an office in Australia. We've got European locations, and that's great for me because I get that global perspective in my research, not only through the survey we conduct for this tech trend study, right? We have our Future of IT survey that goes out around the world, but then in the interviews that I get to conduct too with leading experts in doing cutting edge things in fields right around the world. So that's me, and that's the sort of the background of the research that we do for the Tech Trends Report.
Okay, amazing. And, before we get into your comments, Brian, if you're in the audience and joining for the first time, make sure you guys post your questions, comments, and if you can post your location right now, if you're listening in, it's always good to get a gauge on, where you're joining from. So Brian, overall, I guess, looking at your community, and you have, I believe, a lot of CIOs that are part of the community, right? And my understanding is that, and you can probably tell us more in terms of, what your community is composed of, but my understanding is that it's very CIO focused, and probably one of the leading brands, I guess, for CIOs. Other media companies, my understanding is that they sort of have the mixed. Even Gartner probably have, CFO, supply chain, CIO, pretty much everybody. But you guys are primarily focused on CIOs, and the surveys and the research that you are doing, it is primarily focused on CIOs, right?
We primarily focus on CIOs and any other technology leader, right? These days in business, technology affects every decision maker.
Yeah.
So it's CIOs for certainly that our membership is composed of, and we want to help anybody that's sitting in that seat where they're looking at emerging technology, especially, right? I find that with what I do, I end up talking to CEOs. I talk to CTOs, right? And the whole executive suite. So yes, it's a lot of CIOs. My research is designed with them in mind, but these days that line is blurring a little bit more in terms of who's making the technology decisions, who's spending on technology, and where does it get applied in the enterprise. Well, it's getting applied to every functional area.
Yeah, so definitely, and we want to set the stage a little bit so that people understand, about the context as well. Our community, Brian, as you know, tend to be slightly more business focused. So we are talking about CFOs, the COOs,
Yes.
and also leans more towards, let's say, the manufacturing, distribution, just because those are the core ERP centric industries, as you know, from the business perspective.
Yeah.
We are kind of in the ERP, e-commerce, the CRM, I would say, and mostly, I mean, in my experience, and you can correct me if that is not what you are hearing in the CIO community, but CIOs, they tend to be focused on two different things, right? Sometimes they are very, very, very technology focused because they are dealing with the tech development, and sometimes they are going to be slightly more business focused, dealing with the business processes, business systems, depending upon the industry that they might be part of. And that's probably the reason the kind of trends that we are going to talk today, they are probably going to be slightly more technology focused,
Of course.
compared to the real business focused. And sometimes, I mean, when you are going to hear, so I'm just telling the audience that when they are going to review these trends, the trends may look different. So you need to understand the context where it is coming from, but the technology is going to help in understanding what to expect overall, and how you can make your decision. So this is going to be very helpful decision. So do you have any follow-up comments there, Brian, based on my commentary?
Yeah, I like your perspective and making sure that we understand the context of which these trends are being presented.
Yeah,
And what we're always telling our members, right, at Infotech Research Group, of course, we serve the IT department primarily, as you point out, and that CIO group. But we're always telling them you have to be business aligned. And now more than ever, right, there's a
yeah,
pathway there for the CIO to become a CEO.
yes,
Right, and they want to sit at the decision maker table. It's not the IT department of 10 years ago,
yeah,
right, or even 5 years ago. This is an IT department that can affect company strategy, that
yeah,
can help a company meet its goals and move the metrics that really matter. It's not just about the speeds and the feeds, right? We're thinking about how to build and buy technology that's going to get us closer to achieving the big vision of the
yeah,
company. And I think when we explore the tech trends, there's a couple of dimensions that CIOs are thinking about that, and that every organization should be considering when it comes to what's the strategic capabilities that we need to seize
yeah,
to unlock the path to the future. And as we'll explore, those big themes are simulating the future, right? So in the past, right, Sam, and certainly ERP fits into this, right?
yeah,
Is that our technology was about recording what has happened. How well can we record data and
yeah,
observe and track the metrics of what's already occurred? Just getting a grip on that has been challenging, but what we need now and what the technology allows us to do now
yeah.
is start to predict outcomes, start to simulate different probable futures, and that's very interesting. And then from another perspective, a more control based perspective and security based perspective, where we're mitigating risks, we need knowledge assurance, right? And we need to create that trusted environment for IT and for the organization to leverage these emerging technologies without exposing themselves to too much risks and hurting themselves at the end.
Okay, amazing. So let's do a quick rundown of different trends that you are seeing, and then we'll be
Right?
touching on each of them, sequentially, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have three themes and six tech trends in the report this year, right? So the three technology themes in the report are exponential AI. And within that, we're looking at, yes, AI is exploding out into
Yeah,
the enterprise. It's going to be used in almost every business process. You know, your ERP vendors out there, they've been incorporating generative
yeah,
AI right into their products, right? You look at SAP, you look at Oracle, you look at what Salesforce is doing, even, and they're integrating these large language models into the core of their systems now. So it's really changing everything. So within that, we're looking at two different trends, which is expert models, expert AI models we're talking about, right? Yes, the foundation models are out there. They're easy to access. I'd even say they're commodity at this point. We need to move past tapping into, GPT 4.0 or the models from Meta or Cohere or whatever it is you're using. You need to go beyond that. How do we do additional pre-training? How do we add expert context or industry context to get that model more purpose-built, more fit for the organization's needs? And then on the other side of that, we have AI sovereignty, right? How do we maintain control and make sure that what we're doing with AI is not actually giving up on any control or any decision making position that we want to maintain for our organization? We're very familiar now that when we use these large language models, there's that possibility that our data will be used to train the large language
Yeah.
model. So we have to make sure that doesn't happen. We have to also maintain control over the costs and over the quality of the performance, right? We want to control our performance standards and the service standards for the enterprise. So then we have pre-quantum foundations. Now you might say, what, quantum computing? You're talking about this already for 2025? And yeah, it's surprising, but there's a couple of things that we need to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, right, we have quantum advantage. So there are leading edge firms out there that are deploying quantum solutions into the field, commercial deployments. And I've seen some optimization case studies that are amazing, not using pure quantum computing, but doing some quantum computing calculations in a hybrid setup. So that's fascinating. And there's a whole, future to unravel there with quantum computing. But what's most pressing for every organization is this idea of post quantum cryptography, right? So we have a big problem in the world where the encryption that you and I are using right now, to stream this podcast, that every organization relies upon to store their data, to do transactions with their banks and with their governments. Well, the encryption is going to become obsolete. And it's going to happen on a day we call Q Day. All right. So Q Day is someday in the future when quantum computing becomes sufficiently powerful to crack the code on the encryption standards we used by doing prime factoring, right? So I won't get into the math of it. I'll spare you that, Sam.
Yeah.
But the headline here is that we need to migrate our encryption standards, and we need to do it now. Not only before the day comes when quantum computing is powerful enough to crack the code of encryption, but we need to do it now before the bad guys are stealing the information out of our servers and storing it, waiting for that day, right? In a harvest now, decrypt later attack. All right, and our last theme is digital humans. Yes, the digital humans are here. They've arrived. Hopefully, they won't replace us yet. I haven't sent my deep fake to do this podcast, but we are seeing this happen, right? There's the legitimate use of AI avatars deployed to be in commercials, be in advertisements, be at airport terminals to assist and give directions. And then on the other side of that, now that deep fakes can be generated by AI,
Yeah.
and they're extremely realistic, and the technology is available for anyone to use, we have to think about deepfake defense. How do we know what's real anymore? How do we know that we're really talking to the person that we think we're talking to? That's going to become much more difficult in 2025.
Yeah, so very interesting. So I'm going to have a lot of comments there, I guess. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. So overall, I guess I don't know whether we want to touch on the encryption comment first. Let's get that out of our way because obviously that is very scary at this point of time.
Yeah,
It seems like Y2K in my mind, and I'm glad that people at least know that.
yeah.
Because in the case of Y2K, we didn't even know, what was going to happen. So tell us, for the business audience, if they might not be aware of this, okay, what is going to happen? That is number one. So I know that you did mention that the encryption or the math that we have behind the encryption is probably going to become obsolete. So is it going to be primarily because the quantum computing power is going to be far more that it can break the encryption, or the math is not going to work in the new model?
Yeah, exactly. So the way that quantum computing works is that quantum computers are just better at certain types of calculations
Yeah,
than classical computers are today, right? And
yeah,
with qubits, they're fundamentally different than
yeah,
the bits that we use for our systems today, right? Not only can they be one or zero, but
yeah,
they can be some degree of both one and zero, every gradient in between there. All right, so that means that it's possible to basically calculate many different roots or branches of a problem simultaneously, right? And as a result, this type of computing will one day soon, right? In the future, we don't know when, but it will be able to do the math that we use to protect our data, right? So if you think about how encryption works, right, where most people are sort of familiar with this concept of public key, private key encryption.
yeah,
So there's the public key where whoever you're connecting with, the Google, the StreamYards, the Meta, of the world. They have a public key, you have your own private key, and by combining those together, you're
yeah.
able to create that encrypted tunnel for communication, right? But what makes that encryption work is that, and those keys are, they're able to be solved by quantum computing, basically through calculating every possible key that could be generated, right? So it won't be safe anymore, and it'll be trivial to unlock. So imagine operating without encryption today. It would just be unthinkable. We wouldn't be able to transact in this world. We wouldn't be able to do business, right? Nothing would be secure, and nobody would be able to trust doing anything digitally. So that's a world that we can't live in, and that's why we need to start preparing for this.
Okay, so let's talk about quantum a little bit more, I guess. So one of the comments that you mentioned that we might be a little early with quantum, but this is the first time, at least from my
Yeah.
perspective, I have heard quantum mentioned in the UN speech. So obviously, this is being internationally recognized at this point of time. I don't know whether you heard the speech, from Joe Biden, I believe, or Kamala Harris, one of those people. They mentioned the quantum along with AI, obviously. And I don't know if AI is going to be a driver, because right now, if I look at AI, you are going to require a lot more compute, you are going to require a lot more energy. So obviously AI is driving a lot of things. So do you see that the reason why quantum is going to become mainstream now is because AI is going to need that firepower? Is that a fair statement?
Um, it's one of the drivers for sure,
Okay.
Sam. And when I look at the use cases for quantum computing, yes, machine learning, AI, it's one of the leading use cases that people are excited about. So it's one of the reasons that we're pursuing quantum computing, and it's one of the first things that we'll be applying quantum computing for, certainly. But not only that, AI is actually going to be the key to making quantum computing useful. And again, as I was explaining with quantum computing doing different types of calculations than classical computers do. So we've got our silicon chips, right, that do certain calculations, and most of the calculations that computers do today, that doesn't need to change. It's excellent at doing that. There's no reason to try and do it better with a quantum computer. But there's some problems they can't solve. And that's where we want quantum computing to come in, right? And so, how do we make the decisions? How do we know when a problem should be offloaded to the quantum computer? That's where AI is going to come in. And AI is going to create this sort of transition period, a long period, probably, that's going to be both quantum computing and classical computing working together, being integrated in this hybrid sort of way. So AI is very key to the future of quantum computing.
Okay, very interesting. So let's go back to exponential AI, I guess. So let's say
Sure.
if people might not be familiar with what that is and what that means, for the business right now. I mean, they are sort of getting the taste of AI. They kind of don't know, how to sort of consume that and how to generate the business value from it. Yes, there is
Yeah.
some, for the technology companies, maybe just because companies are investing at this point of time. And in my mind, I would call AI right now in more of the R&D phase. It's not the mainstream commercialization. Yes, the investment is happening. Yes, the R&D is happening, but the commercial value might not be fully known, at least in 2024.
Yeah, I disagree with you. I think it
Okay.
is quite known, right? And I think that the type of AI that we're seeing deployed right now is extremely commercial in nature. Look at, this open AI isn't an academic institution, right?
Yeah.
They're out there to make money. Let's be honest. We're familiar with the boardroom drama. We know what Sam Altman is after, and we know
Yeah.
why Microsoft made that $1 billion deal with them,
Yeah.
right? Look at AI is
Yeah.
being developed by the commercial sector now, right?
Yeah.
They've become the leaders. They have the most compute power when you look at the Amazons and Microsofts and Googles of the world,
Yeah.
and they have the most access to data to train AI, right? Which is why we've seen the rapid commercialization in this space. And now we're at the point, Sam, where we're seeing AI, not only is it being sold as a huge business value generator for those tech giants, but it's being applied to every area of business, which is where we see generative AI. And in fact, the investment in the business community is so great that AI, for the last couple of years running, has been the fastest growing net new technology that businesses are investing in. So AI, we put it in our emerging quadrant so
Yeah.
far,
Yeah.
where yes, it's new to organizations, but they've been rapidly investing and growing investment in this area, and soon it's going to cross over into that transformative area of technology, right there along with cloud computing and cybersecurity. Organizations are leveraging it. They've invested in it previously. They continue to invest in it at a high level to drive benefits across many different business processes.
Yeah, so very interesting. So let's touch a little bit more in terms of the business value, and obviously we want to touch on the use cases because, as I mentioned, our audience is business focused audience, right? And they are trying to figure out, okay, how they can take advantage of these use cases if their competitors might be doing something similar. So obviously, as you correctly pointed out, that the AI is going to be baked with any of the enterprise software category. The majority of the companies are trying to figure out how they can generate business value, but I don't know if that has really resulted into the commercial outcome. And when I say commercial outcome, meaning customers are willing to pay more for the AI use cases. Right now, I don't know whether you are paying for generative AI. I'm using it because it's free.
Yeah.
The moment, I mean, if somebody's going to charge me $1,000 per
Hmm.
day, am I going to pay? Probably not.
Yes, well, we see that they are paying for it, right? So 87% of organizations that are investing in AI, they're investing in generative AI, and about three-quarters of organizations are investing in AI. So the investment is happening, Sam. But I think what you're getting at here is that we're still in that experimental phase. We're still in the piloting phase, and
Yeah.
a lot of organizations that we talk to at Infotech, they're saying, where's the business value? When do we get our return on an investment? We've made this investment. Now we want to see it put to work, right? And there's this sort of craving for artificial intelligence to produce value. And there's been a lot of hype. There's no doubt about that. So there's perhaps inflated expectations here.
Yeah.
And the truth, though, is that there is a lot of organizations that are succeeding and have great proof points, and there's a lot of examples of that in the report too.
Okay, very interesting. So let's touch on the AI sovereignty, and I guess, I mean, there are going to
Okay,
be a lot of changes because of that as well, right? Because again, as I mentioned, I mean, this has become more of the international security issue right now. It's not just the national security issue, because that
right.
was mentioned in the speech as well. So right now, I mean, in my mind, what I have personally seen in last 20 years, Brian, I don't know if you share the same experience or not. The regulations are always going to be behind, because the government, the regulations or regulatory bodies, they are trying to get a feel of how bad this could get, right? And then obviously they are going to tighten the belt a little bit. I mean, that's how the majority of the technologies work. They will let companies play first and understand the outcome, how impactful that might be. I mean, for example, let's say if you look at in 2024, whatever happened with CrowdStrike, uh, we kind of knew that, but I mean, nobody was really creating any sort of regulations, and I don't know if that is going to be created in the next 10 years. We know that the problem exists, but the reason why governments are not acting right now, because they don't know for sure if this is going to be that bad, right? So the regulations are always going to be behind technology. Technology is going to be far ahead. So what are some changes that
Yeah.
you are seeing, expecting, that is going to be at the international level? Because this is a data security issue. There are crazy scenarios from the geopolitical perspective, right? And we are
Yeah.
already seeing some of those.
Oh, I hear what you're saying. Technology is always way ahead of regulators, and we've seen some of those Senate hearings where the tech leaders come in front of the Senate.
Yeah.
They're explaining the basics of how these systems work, right? So sometimes um, we feel like need some millennials into government or something
Yeah.
to better understand this. But AI is one area where actually government has been saying, we've missed the boat on too many technology waves that have changed the entire world,
Yeah.
social media, right? And we're sort of feeling the fallout of that now in many different ways. And at the same time, you have people developing AI, like Jeff Hinton, out there warning about the existential risks
Yeah.
to humanity. Right? AI could potentially change the economy, automate so much of it, there's not enough jobs left. Or could AI actually start competing with humanity and take its own agency, and we'd lose control of our intelligence and our systems in the world? That's a scary thought, right? We've seen the movies, we've seen Terminator, we
Yeah.
know how that script ends. So governments are, acknowledging that there's some smart people saying, hey, these outcomes could be really bad, and they're taking action. They're taking it seriously. Look, in Europe, they already passed their AI Act, right? It's into law now, so they're figuring out how to regulate that, and who's affected and what the compliance concerns are. But my message here in this report is, don't wait for the regulators. You as every organization uh, ultimately faces a threat from not AI, but the organizations, the vendors using AI, right? And providing you AI, because there's different interests at play here, right? What does Microsoft want? What does Amazon want?
Yeah.
What does Google want? They want your data so they can train AI, right? They
Yeah.
won't tell you that. In fact, they'll tell you, they'll promise you that they're not going to use your data, use your company data to train their models. But then you look at the models they're providing you. Where did the data come from?
Yeah.
It was taken from everybody.
Yeah.
It's copyrighted data that's
Yeah.
being used to train these models already. So do we fully trust them? No, you can't. So the legal contract has to be in there to protect you, and the infrastructure has to be in there to protect you. You have to make sure that you have your own private tenancy when you're in the cloud. You have to make sure you have your own version of that model that's not exposed externally. It needs to be encrypted all the way across, right? The data that goes in, the data in the model itself, the data that comes out, that all has to be protected. So it's a new world with different risks, and you have to make sure that your intellectual property stays confidential. Your sensitive data is protected. And it's not just that, right? It's the controls, it's the costs. All of these services, how are they provided? Through the cloud. How do you pay for them? Per token on an API basis. It basically means the more you use, the more you pay. So we're tying all these different systems into the they are going to cost pennies. It starts off as it looks cheap. It's pennies per transaction,
Yeah.
but suddenly you're running a million transactions a day, becomes expensive, right? We've learned this lesson from other cloud services. Let's make sure that we're cost controlling for AI, being smart about um, runaway, preventing runaway costs.
Yeah, so very interesting. So, I have two different layers that I can unpack here in the comments that you mentioned. Number one, the probably the privacy one.
Mm,
It's a very interesting argument. If you look at the emotional argument that, okay, don't share your data. Obviously, I don't know whether that argument is coming because you don't want others to make money on your data. That could be one possibility, or are they really worried about the privacy? The other argument is more from the business perspective. In my mind, if you look, I look at ChatGPT or any other AI forces right now. I think the way search is happening is going to change, right? It's already changing. So let's say the way you are, let's say, looking for any sort of recommendations or services, obviously with AI, it's going to be slightly more tailored to your experience. So then you are probably going to move. Google is probably trying to figure out, okay, how much AI do they need to embed in their search workflows? So there's going to be a substantial impact of AI workflows in how we find information, how we research providers. So that is actually going to drive the entire market. Now, if you really think about it from the business perspective, okay, do, do you want to share data? Do you not want to share data? Okay, if you were serious business, then you probably want to share data as much as possible. That's how these algorithms are going to know about your company and about you, and you want to make sure that that is shared. But then the other argument is there that you don't want to share. So where would you put yourself,
Yeah.
I guess, in
This
this
is great.
argument?
You're thinking like a CIO now, right? You're talking about identity access management. You're talking about access controls, and this is the crux of the problem. We want to share our data,
Yeah.
but not share it with certain people, right? So there's confidential data in our organizations, right? So there's data that we all, not only do we not want to share externally, but there's only certain people within the organization that we want to share that data with, right? Let's think about the most extreme case. I think that's helpful here. Imagine you were defense department, right? You're inside the government and you want to leverage AI. Are you going to be happy just getting a tenancy on Microsoft's cloud and uploading all your classified data into that environment? No, that's never been the standard, right? You've never been, you were the last to use the cloud because you weren't going to use any cloud resources that risked exposing data outside of the country, right? And not only that, but you just couldn't trust a third party that would have access to your data, even if there was a very small, minute risk and pathway for it to be exfiltrated. So, the problem that we're facing is that, of course, we want data to be shared and we want it to enable knowledge creation across our company and
Yeah.
by different employees, and sometimes externally, right? There's data that we do want out there in the world about our companies, of course, for marketing purposes, for shared research purposes, even for shared development purposes in an industry. But we want to be in control of that. We want to make sure that our company secrets stay company secrets.
Okay, so very interesting. So I don't know, Amici, at this point of time, are you seeing that AI models are also trying to use the confidential data? I mean, there could always be an argument related to copyrighted data, but for the most part, I think the models that are trying to use the information that is probably in the public domain. Uh, Obviously, there could be argument that okay, that is my copyrighted article or video or the podcast that I've published, and they should not be using it. I should be getting the licensing fee, I guess, as part of that. There are arguments, but for the most part, I guess my understanding is that AI models are only using the public data, and in that people have problems because they want to block that as well. It's almost like, I mean, see, in the Google days, I don't know if people would block search engines, and I don't know if that was the trend. I mean, I don't remember. Maybe you remember. You were probably surveying CIOs at that time. Did we have a wave at that time as well that okay, I have my website, I don't want Google to crawl? uh,
Yeah,
did that happen by any chance? Do you know, during those
sometimes
waves?
it does. Yes, and that's why we have robots.txt, right? That file on your
Yeah.
website that gives web crawlers instructions on whether they can look at your information or not. So that was a concern with Google, but with AI, it's like an exponentially magnified concern, right? Because Google can point to where the data resides on the internet. What is the address of it, right? It can surface it for others,
Yeah.
but AI steals it, right? It takes it and it incorporates it into an answer engine that doesn't need to go back to the address. It puts it into a model without attribution, without a way for the user to go back, and we're losing our digital storefronts, right? So you look at the impacts across media, right? The whole business model is
Yeah.
we get people to come to our website and we serve them ads. Well, you can't serve ads, right? If they're not coming to our website because now they're getting the answers provided to them right in the search engines, right? So Google, Microsoft, the two major search engines, and really Google, which is serving 80% of the search market. They have AI answers now, and if a search that would have taken you to the New York Times before is now just providing you the answer right on Google because it's been taken that New York Times data and trained on it. Well, that's a problem for the New York Times, right? It can't serve you ad, it can't make money, it can't attract subscribers, right? Doesn't get the chance to meet and control its customer relationship. And that's why the New York Times is suing OpenAI, right? Because they say, hey, we never gave you permission to take our data. In fact, some of it was behind a paywall. And now you've used it to create a product, right? That you're making revenue on. Now, all those copyright cases, none of this has been decided. I don't know what the outcome is going to be. I'm not enough of copyright expert to tell you whether who's going to win or what the outcome is going to be. But we do know that it is becoming more difficult for AI companies to train in this way, right? And if you look at the history of OpenAI and how it had a nonprofit structure, and it was using that structure to be able to um, leverage some of this copyrighted data that was
Yeah.
collected by web crawlers and search engine crawlers. It's complicated. It gets
Yeah.
messy fast. I think we have to stay focused on for organizations is to recognize that when your employees go to ChatGPT, the free version, and they type in data, that data is used to train the model, right? So you have to think about policies that stop that from happening, that make people aware that we can't give away certain secrets. Now, for some cases, it's fine, right? There's things that you'll do in the course of work that don't involve company secrets and sensitive data, and that's fine to use ChatGPT for. But are you going to go and start uploading employee and customer names and information? You can't do that. That's now we've lost control of our data, right? So this is where the concern lies. This
Yeah.
is where we have to think about maintaining confidentiality.
So very interesting argument. So let's say, in the previous world prior to AI, I guess there was some sort of traceability. So let's say if I'm exposing this data and this was all protected by contracts, for example, let's say if you hire employees and you want to make sure that the contracts have that, okay, you are not supposed to leak the data, or if you are hiring vendor, then you want to make sure that they are not going to leak that data, and you had some sort of control traceability on your information data. And that's how you sort of protected the organization. That's how you committed to your customer that, hey, when you are doing business with me, I want to make sure that your data is going to be protected. Now, to your argument about that, okay, you want to make sure that you are not exposing anything to ChatGPT. So how are companies thinking here? Because let's say if I'm an employee, a disgruntled employee, for a company, and I go and I expose data and there is no trace, who exposed that? I don't know if there is going to be a
Yeah.
traceability. So how are companies?
If you don't get caught, there's no problem, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. But I mean, for company, there is a real problem because they
Yes.
are kind of screwed. So, so how are
Mm,
companies ascertaining that? I mean, because see, let's say if I'm the
right.
employee, and even if I'm not doing that on the company server, and I don't know if we have servers in 2024, everything is happening on the internet right now. If I go back to my home, take data, put it there, maybe there is a trace. I don't know, because you took out the data and probably you
Yeah.
sort of published it on ChatGPT. But let's say if I'm doing internally, I don't know if there's going to be a real trace, I guess. So how would companies control this legally?
Exactly. Great question. So the first thing they did, right? So remember, it's been a couple of years now, right? So almost 2 years exactly since ChatGPT hit the web, right? In
Yeah,
November of 2022. What was the first thing we saw them do? They created policies that said, hey, don't use ChatGPT at all, right? And
yeah,
in many cases, they just said to employees, you can't go there because you can't have this risk. For example, I remember talking to a nuclear services, like a nuclear power plant services company. So they're
yeah,
going into critical infrastructure. They've got secret schematics about nuclear power plants, stuff that you can't just have leak into the world, right? And
yeah,
the first thing they did when ChatGPT came out is they had a policy not only in terms of telling employees you can't go to ChatGPT and use it, but they used a firewall type of web filtering solution to ban that from employee devices, right? So all corporate devices could not go to use those services.
Yeah.
All right. So the first thing that happened is we all reacted with policy, but then there was what came after, right? So first we took control, or CIOs took control and put the policy in place, and the next thing they did is they found a way to create that trusted environment. If they found a way to enable the organization with the capability they wanted, which is what ChatGPT showed us. It showed us the power of the large language models to help us solve problems, to help us summarize text, to find answers in huge swaths of information, and so much more. Right. So they said, let's set up that large language model, not in an environment that's not under our control, but in one that we trust. Right. So, if, for example, we have an Azure cloud tenancy today that we
Yeah.
like to operate in, it's our own privately controlled tenancy in terms of other organizations don't have access to this. The vendor doesn't have access to this because we have the encryption keys. We have legal contracts to prevent access. Let's set up the large language model there, right? And Microsoft, and all these tech companies, they were smart about it. They caught on very quickly that organizations would need this trusted environment to operate. And that's why you saw ChatGPT Enterprise launched, right? Where it said, hey, we'll give you want something where your data doesn't train our big model. We'll give you that. We'll give you that environment where we don't have the access, but you can use the technology. So that's what we're seeing today, right? And it's evolving even further, right? Where companies are figuring out where they need to, right? How to run those models closer to where the data is, how to run those models even more privately, sometimes on their own infrastructure, sometimes on their own devices. So there's not even that exposure to somebody else's server.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. So let's analyze this from the other perspective, and again, the power of AI, I guess. And I don't know, Brian, how much you are noticing how our workflows are changing on a daily basis, because obviously tech companies are trying to figure out, how to take advantage of AI. And one of the things that I was doing on LinkedIn, I don't know whether you noticed this or not. I was trying to post a comment, and LinkedIn could detect that. Okay, don't post this comment because it is actually kind of spammy. Okay, and I was like, okay, what did I write here? And I was simply trying to make a comment and post, I guess, that I don't know, swiping your credit card or some sort of analogy or reference that I had in that. And LinkedIn was trying to say, you know what, this is, you are probably asking for money or whatever. So it
Right,
caught me on that, right? But I mean,
right.
AI is smart enough to detect these things, that okay, when you are sharing your confidential data or any sort of commentary, then AI is able to detect that. So now let's analyze this from the other side. So, for example, obviously, OpenAI, the generic models are going to have some sort of controlled workflows where they are going to have these some sort of regulations built. But they're not going to know, for example, let's say to your example about defense or the confidential data, that okay, if a company has confidential data, employee numbers, credit cards, some things might be known, but everything is not going to be known publicly. So they are going to have their own sort of regulations. So do you foresee some sort of GRC kind of model, coming up for these private models, that okay, enterprises, Walmart, financial organizations, yes, you want to capitalize on the capabilities of ChatGPT, but you want to have these rules configured for your environment so that your employees can be prompted whenever they are going to be sharing. Would that be a possibility in your mind? What
Yeah.
do you think?
Yeah, exactly, Sam. I agree. That's the direction it's going in. And what we talk a lot about to our clients is the AI governance model that you need to put in place for your organization, right? So I've been talking about setting up that trusted environment
Yeah.
so far so we can harness these capabilities, but then you have to think about um, the fallout of using the capabilities too, right? And are we using AI ethically? What are the outcomes for our customers? What are the risks that we're creating? In terms of privacy, in terms of bias and human ethics. So that all has to be considered. And there's a best practice is it's under development right now in terms of AI governance. And I think that's what organizations are trying to determine right now. the legislation that's out there, it helps, right? Because you can look at it and you can say, what have they considered? What have they thought about through the legal process of protecting a society, protecting a country, and what are the implications for us as as a company, as an organization that has employees to protect, that has customers to protect and treat fairly. Uh, so that's a great guidepost, and the organizations have been looking at that. And there's certain things that we already know we have to do. We need um, a multifaceted um, assembly of a committee of different executives to be responsible for AI. It can't just be up to the CIO. You know, you can't have one person that's going to be accountable for it all.
Yeah.
You need multiple leaders to take ownership and make decisions about how AI is deployed. And from there, it's about the transparency of when we
Mhm.
use AI and how we use it. It's about monitoring the outcomes after the fact. Has there been bias? Has there been harm caused by the application of AI? And there's the explainability of it all, right? Are we able to actually communicate and understand internally where AI is making decisions and how it's happening?
Okay, so very interesting. So some of the trends that we are noticing in our space is that some of the legacy trends, and they were very hot at one point of time, but then it was like, okay, maybe they are not there and they don't have the same commercial potential that we were thinking. And technologies such as your metaverse, I mean, it was really hot in, I don't know, 2021, 2022, and in 2024, nobody's really talking about them. They are not necessarily getting any sort of investments, right? But with the AI, things are changing a little bit. I mean, now I can see some more potential there, some more newer use cases. So those technologies are sort of coming back, and they are showing different level of potential. So now let's talk about AI traceability. Do you see that technologies such as blockchain might come back, meaning with a lot more potential than we originally thought? Because obviously there are going to be national security issues, international security issues, and I don't know which technology is going to help us, trace the signature, especially when you talk about deepfakes. I don't know if they are going to get social security numbers.
Yeah,
But
right.
we need
Yeah,
some sort of identification or
right.
signature, right? To be able to trace them. So do you think that
Yeah.
maybe blockchain could be a solution for that?
Yeah, a social security number, social deepfake number, maybe for every deepfake that's created. That's a good
They are
idea.
not going to get benefits, okay?
Yeah,
No
yeah. Well,
benefit to them.
what if they pay taxes and they might deserve it? But this you bring up the exactly where blockchain might play a role in helping us determine when we're encountering a deepfake or not. Right.
Yeah,
So this is one of the examples in the Tech Trends report. I'll point to a website called swear.com. Right. There's a business out there that wants to play a role in verification of where did video come from? Where did content come from? Right. And
yeah,
you think about when you're looking at a deep fake, right? Or you're just looking at anything online and you're trying to figure out these days, is this misinformation, right? Can I trust this? Where did this come from? And a lot of the question is often about who created it, right? And
yeah,
what's their motivation? What's their intent? If I know after I watch something or see a post on social media who it originated from, I
yeah,
can go a long way to figuring out how I should interpret that information. Now, that's often not the case today. You know, when you see information, there's no way to really trace its provenance, right? Somebody might say this came from Sam originally, but how do I really know, right?
yeah,
And especially if somebody's got a deepfake video that looks like you know, I might be fooled, right? If they're trying to imitate you. So, what is possible with blockchain is we'd create some sort of ecosystem
yeah,
and foundation where everything that gets created is tracked, right? And there's that provenance, so it would have to be logged into the blockchain, right? So a block is created. You create a video, you upload it to a social media network, say, that's recorded, right? And then it goes over to me, and I take it, and maybe I'm editing it, right? And it would that would be logged into the blockchain, and it would be logged. How did Brian change this? Did he add new images? Did he um, add 50% new content to this? Did he add 25% new content? Right? So that information would be there. So that gets passed along in my post, right? So we could add metadata, right?
Yeah.
So the information behind the information that's on top, and
Yeah.
users could use that as a tool to help them in their judgments. And companies like media companies
Yeah.
could use that as well to determine how much can we trust this information. But that's obviously a big system to set up, and we're sort of dependent on the media distribution organizations, the social media networks,
Yeah.
to start using these tools. If that's the route that we want to go, which is why blockchain and setting up an environment like that, it's not going to be the full answer, right? It might be part of the answer. We might see some environment set up like that to ensure confidential information. For example, the White House
Yeah.
says it's going to start cryptographically signing all of its communications
Yeah.
so that if Joe Biden, the president, comes out and puts out a video or a statement, that it came from the White House. You can verify that at least. It's not a deep fake. So that's helpful, but it's only one solution among many that we'll need to ensure that we can trust information in the future.
Okay, very interesting. So I don't know where the technology is, and probably you know this, far better than I do. In the media industry, let's say if I look at YouTube, I mean, they already had this technology to be able to detect any of the video clip, audio clip. I know that if I'm utilizing any sort of audio video clip, they are able to flag it that, okay,
Yeah,
you have a copyrighted material. And I don't know how
right.
they do that. And I don't know if there are any sort of regulations. For example, let's say if I take somebody's video or audio clip and I'm simply trying to export in my media editor, and I don't know if there are regulations for these tools that you are supposed to change the metadata, that okay, this was changed here. I mean, that happens in pharma industry as well, right? Anytime anybody who's going to touch your what is that, the bottle of medicine, right, that you have, they have to sort of provide the audit log or whatever. There are regulations around that. In media world, I don't know if there are regulations, and how controlled the metadata is going to be. Do you know by any chance if there are any
There's
sort of
not. No, there's no
okay?
regulate. No, there's not. And everything that YouTube has done there is just because they're afraid of being sued by copyright holders. So that's what they're trying to protect against. So, and copyright is something that the owner has to be proactive about protecting, right? So there's no government enforcement agency is going to come along and tell YouTube, hey, you posted a copyrighted video, we're going to take action against you. That's not the way it works. It has to be the copyright owner going through civil enforcement actions, right? So that's what YouTube is doing there, and like you're raising, another potential way that we could protect against the spread of AI, right? And the industry is working on this idea of watermarking, right?
Huh.
So when YouTube sees a video uploaded and it knows it's copyrighted material from Disney, right? It can create a code that recognizes that content, a song, a piece of audio, a piece of video, and then if other users are using that clip, they see the same algorithm, right? They see the same piece of code. They say, "Oh, that's from this other video. You're not allowed to use that." So with AI, we could do something similar, where when we create content with AI,
Yeah.
it gets watermarked, right? So there's certain tools that create AI generated material, right? If we're using Dolly, right, the image generator, and ChatGPT, it could have a little piece of code that tells us that image has come from ChatGPT or Midjourney, all these Adobe tools, etc. Right? So the industry could all agree on that and say, yes, we'll watermark our AI generated content so that other people are able to detect it's AI generated. But the problem is, Sam, that there's open source AI, right? So even if you embed these guardrails in the open source programs, people can just take it and remove them. So we'll still be living in a world where ultimately the stuff that we see generated, or the videos, the images, could still be generated by AI, and somebody's just gone that extra distance to remove the safeguards and remove the watermarking,
So
right?
that's
And or
very
even something more simple, right? Just to give you an example, like I see a picture online that is watermarked, I take a screenshot and I repost it. Now the watermark's gone.
So that's very interesting argument about the open source. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that. So are you suggesting that the open source cannot be trusted as much because you cannot enforce the regulations, because you don't have companies behind that, so nobody is really signing the contract, nobody has legal liability, and that's why they can
Yeah.
do whatever they want? Is that the reason? And
Yep.
is that going to be applicable for any of the open source software that we are using, that hey, I'm working for free, you are not allowed to sue me?
Well, okay. So when we have open source software, right? You're thinking about maybe the companies that are releasing the open source software.
Yeah.
They're not the ones we have to worry about, right? Like Meta is a good example here. Like I don't think Meta is going to take open source its AI models that it's designing and releasing for anything that's going to be too harmful. But what the problem is when they release the model weights and they tell us the secret sauce behind that AI, and then they let anybody download it and use it. There's no way to track who's using it or what they're using it for, right? So we've already seen this for certain types of criminal activity, to be frank with you. They use open source models, right? Because they can download them. They're not dependent on leveraging them. It's not like they're logging into ChatGPT, right? And using their account on a company server that a law enforcement agency can track and investigate or go and get that information from the company. No, it's happening on their own computers. So this is the problem with open source. I mean, there's many benefits to open source, and I'm not debating. I'm not here to say we have to stop open source or anything, but we do have to be aware of the risks.
Yeah, so very interesting. So let's talk about the pricing a little bit more. Overall, I guess one of the things that we are realizing in 2024, all of the CIOs, I don't know, how many of them are not going to feel that cloud is definitely very expensive at this point of time. It's sort of uncontrollable. I mean, that's the sentiment that we are getting in our customer base. And
Yeah,
recently, I don't know whether you followed the news or not. I mean, AWS admitted that they are not able to grow as much, and I don't know if that is just because they are losing
sure.
market share, but they have admitted that. I mean, the cloud repatriation is happening. That's in play at this point of time. CIOs are already thinking that, okay, does it make sense to invest so much in cloud, because this has become really, really, really expensive, and now with AI it's going to be really uncontrollable in my mind.
Yeah.
So are you seeing that trend as well, that people are thinking that, what, cloud is probably way too expensive, and then we should be thinking about other options?
Yeah. So the way I would frame this is that a lot of organizations that rushed into cloud did it badly, right? And the big trends are still that cloud is growing.
Yeah.
Organizations are spending more to uh, increase their cloud usage, in fact. And nobody wants to run on-premises service. All right, so we're not going back, right? We talk about cloud repatriation. It's not really like we're just going back to running our own data centers. Sorry, if you're into that, some people really love running their own servers. It's not the future, right? There's always going to be some uh, little corner of on-premises stuff that we want to do, but it's not the old model of let's run everything through a data center that's on-prem. What's happening though is the runaway costs, is the bill shock with cloud spend, and organizations realizing that they did their lift and shift. They took everything they were running on-prem and put it in the cloud version of SAP, and suddenly they're paying operational costs that they're not used to, right? They're saying, wait a minute, uh, this is really expensive. We're doing a lot of input output work with these cloud workloads, and the bills are higher than we thought they'd be. How do we get out of this, right? So you have to do the work up front, and it's a total refactoring of the platform. It's not a lift and shift. So the companies that did it right, they avoid this scenario where they're suddenly paying through the nose and shocked by the operational costs, right? But we shifted capital costs to operational. And the fact today is that if you want access to the latest capabilities, you need to be in cloud compute, right? It's where you're able to operate flexibly, not worry about setting up your development environment, not worry about all the um, infrastructure work that comes from setting up a server and maintaining it. So cloud is the future. There's no doubt about that. What companies have to be better at is the financial operations around the cloud.
Okay, very good. So we are close to our time right now. I don't know if you're going to have any sort of closing advice, for our listeners, and obviously if they have any sort of follow-up questions, then do you want to provide some more information how they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the Tech Trends 2025 report available on infotech.com right now. That you can won't miss it. It's right on the front page if you go there. And if people want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn. Uh, you can look up my name or slash Urban Paddler is my handle there. And on Twitter, I'm Brian J. Jackson, or X as we call it now, unfortunately.
Amazing, Brian. Thank you so much. Once again for your time. You are super insightful. Obviously, you are talking to a lot of CIOs, so your insights are real. So thank you so much once again for sharing that. So yeah, guys, that's a wrap. If you joined for the first time, this was part of our podcast series, for which we meet every Friday at somewhere between 8 to 11 a.m. Eastern. So make sure you guys stay tuned for the next episodes. On that note, Brian and everybody, thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks so much, Sam.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.